we are discussing management research, and in our last lecture we had seen that there are number of methods for collection of information data in management research. So, now we move on to the next part of our discussion today. First we will discuss the analysis plans and some quantitative techniques that we are using for management research. When we are using any kind of a quantitative analysis, the basic plan of course begins with the type of scales which we are using, and based on that we decide whether our objective needs univariate methods, bivariate methods or multivariate methods. So, this is a decision based on the researcher, and the purpose of the research that you are trying to carry out. When I say this, what I am trying to mean is that is it just for a very quick report, is it for a decision making, is it for some kind of a evaluation of some government policy, is it for an MTech dissertation, is it for a PhD dissertation, or is it a consultancy report. So, in all these situations we are using some aspect of management research methods. So, we have to sometimes the requirement may be that we are just using one variable analysis, and so the percentages and averages may suffice. For example, how many people are poor, how many people are below the poverty line, how many are say in the middle class, how many are above that. If we are just interested into this, we may just have the averages and percentages, in fact percentages in this case, but on an average what are the wages. So, the univariate analysis will be happy, but many a times we are not satisfied only with this analysis, because we would like to know so many other things, how many say men and women, or how many educated people, or what type of profession they are doing, and then their quality of life. So, there may be many issues and where we have to really analyze the situation. This brings us to the bivariate method. Some of these examples which I was trying to give you will relate to bivariate, where two variables are related. Two variables are actually analyzed, and where we are looking at their relationships, then the correlation coefficient as a method we can use. We can also use simple techniques like cross tabulation, we can also use that. So, two variables are there and we are looking at the analysis of these two variables. But often in the management research and the social research, the things are the concepts are multivariate in nature, and so we use multivariate analysis such as regression analysis, which could be a simple multiple regression analysis or a stepwise regression analysis. We use discriminant function analysis, where we are trying to understand say two different organizations or two different states, or say male and female, do they discriminate in terms of a number of variables. So, even discrimination is not in terms of just one variable that we were discussing in the univariate and bivariate scenario, but here number of variables are there and there are two perhaps groups. So, we try to see the how much is the maximum discrimination. We have some other analysis, say the analysis, we have the Duncan tests, we have the Tukey analysis, all these we use for finding out the discrimination of two or many groups. In fact, it could be two group analysis or it could be multiple group analysis also. We use factor analysis as a technique of multivariate method, where we are trying to find out whether number of variables they are closely related to each other, and then do they form a particular factor. Typically, whenever we are doing any kind of index construction or development of a test or questionnaire, we are using factor analysis. Then in the recent years, we are also using structural modeling. We had been using path analysis in the earlier years, and we use of course the correlation and the regression analysis. So, using regression analysis and the path analysis that we had been using, we have now softwares which are giving us the structural modeling. For example, we have Laserel, we have Amos, these are some of the software. Other analysis, the quantitative analysis, earlier as we have discussed, earlier we were doing that just manually, or we were using the calculators. But now, since we have the softwares available, we have the computers available to us, so we are using number of softwares. Typically, we are using SPSS, which is statistical packages for social sciences. Well, all over the globe perhaps we have been using in social sciences, management research, as well as many other subjects, because techniques are the same. So, in addition to this, there are so many other softwares which have been developed. Okay. But simple percentages, averages, this we can even do, we can just prepare a spreadsheet sheet in Excel, and some of these very simple ones we can also do there. But we can perhaps use SPSS for better results, which at least we had been using. There may be many other softwares, but we are generally using this software for our research. So, structural modeling gives us a real analysis of the existence of a particular phenomenon, and the analysis really has the great predictive value about the issue in question. So, maybe if you have not tried, you can look into that. Say for example, buying behavior. Why people would like to buy a particular brand and not the other brand? Okay, there may be number of issues. It could be financial, it could be individual personal choice, it could be social, it could be so many other issues are there. So, the technology related issues could also be there, and public opinion issues may also be there, color choices may also be there. So, if you are really wanting to analyze the buying behavior and really make a good business of your say the automobile sector, it is possible that you collect data using the best unbiased sampling design, the best kind of a tool for data collection, and then have a multivariate analysis, and then repeat the results. Because in any science, replication of a result is very important, and only when we replicate the result number of times with number of samples, we can really come to a real good decision making, and eventually we can say some kind of theorizing. So, that has a great practical utility as well as the theoretical utility. So, from here we are trying to talk about some of the other issues. Okay. let us now look at some of the other issues. For example, the governance model that is used in the management research, and we are actually concerned about governance in various areas. And here you can see that there is a governance model. You have the parameters, okay, various parameters of the governance issue, and we can collect data on all these aspects and make use of the earlier methods, the statistical techniques, quantitative methods we can use. Sometimes we can use both quantitative as well as qualitative techniques. Okay. So, we are talking about governance model these days, and this is one of the ways of looking at the management research that we are doing in the current times. Okay. Do we move on? Governance model. Can you see that we are looking at governance, and the organization development is one aspect. There are other aspects, and we collect data on these, and then we finally arrive at what exactly is the governance. Okay. So, you have data on this and this, and finally we have some kind of analysis, but analysis plan you can decide yourself. You can independently analyze all these and then have a multivariate analysis to arrive at some solution, right. From here we move on to another example. Here I have given you another example. This is about the issue of training programs. Now I am giving you some examples from the management research about how to make use of some of these techniques. So, governance model could be one. Another model could be say the training research. So, in a training research program, we can approach the training and development issue in this stepwise manner, and at each step perhaps we can have the training evaluation. Okay. And finally we have the evaluation of training at the end of the program, that okay, this is the way we had given this. So, these are the various steps of training, okay. And then at the end, see every step also you can look into that what happened when the training design was there, and then how people reacted and things like that, and then finally you have the evaluation of training. We have discussed one of the types of research methods is the evaluation method, and that is also one of the objectives of understanding the management research. So, this gives us an idea about the approach to training and development as to the design of training that we have done. Has that really given us any result, this particular training, or yearly report I can prepare that we had conducted so many trainings. In each training this was the evaluation, and we can design the evaluation process again in terms of taking feedback from various participants. Okay. And then we have, suppose we had 10 training programs in a year, and we can see that how much budget was invested and how much it has really made an impact on the attitudes of people and the direct performance of people, and how many people need further training, further counseling, or further perhaps any kind of input. So, this is the way management research will help us in designing the training and development programs. From here we move on to another aspect, that is business forecasting. In fact, I will be taking up a little bit time on this and a little more information on business forecasting, because this is becoming very important in the again in the recent times. So, business forecasting is an integral part of the strategic planning. various types of forecasts are useful for business depending upon the kind of situation that we are trying to analyze. These include business forecasts, financial forecasts, sales, technological forecasts, and essentially these four types these types are sort of could be combined also. These kinds of forecasts could be combined, and there are number of approaches to analyze these forecasts. And these approaches we could understand as the qualitative approach. Now, you can see the methods that we have discussed earlier in the course in last lecture. We are talking about those in terms of business forecasting. So, the qualitative approach, this forecast is based on the judgment and opinion, and these include the expert opinions, Delphi technique, sales force polling, consumer surveys, techniques for eliciting expert opinion, which could be PERT derived. Then the quantitative approach we have, forecast is based on historical data, which may be time series analysis and which might include, you understand the time series analysis. When data is collected over certain periods, so every say 6 months or every 1 month or every 2 years or something of that kind, because social change is inevitable, that is going on all the time, and even businesses are changing very fast. And so, sometimes the choices of people are also changing very fast. That is why sometimes time series analysis becomes extremely important for us to actually decide on the strategic decisions. And so, these include the native method, the moving averages, exponential smoothing, trend analysis, decomposition of time series, and Box-Jenkins. These are some of the quantitative approaches which we are using for forecasting. Now, we also have associative forecasts. These include simple regression, multiple regression, econometric indicators. We were talking about these methods earlier, and so you can see that in forecasting also we are making use of some of these methods in including the qualitative and the quantitative techniques. Now, forecasts based on the learned behavior, that is also an important way of forecasting, which relates to Markov's approach. And direct methods include market surveys, input output analysis, and the economic indicators. So, can you think about what we had done in our last lecture? We were simply discussing what research is all about and how do we make analysis and what are the different types of research methods. And here we are talking about a very practical issue, just like the governance issue. We are talking about the forecasting issue, business forecasting, because that becomes an extremely important area, if when you are doing business planning for your future. You are deciding what to make, what not to make, how to do your advertising campaign, what should you do in terms of attracting more number of buyers. So there are so many things which relate to the whole issue of business management, in addition to of course the aspects of technology and human behavior. So we move on to the quantitative models which work well as long as little or no systematic change in the environment takes place, isn't that? When patterns of relationships change, the quantitative approach based on human judgment is more useful. And that is why the judgmental forecasting also takes place in the existing trends, but it can identify systematic changes more quickly and interpret better the impact of such changes. What we are trying to say here is that if you have the fixed parameters and you have fixed data, we can make use of quantitative techniques and say at this point of time, okay, this is what we found. But because change is inevitable, as I said just now, and the society moves and the other things move. So, quantitative method has its advantages, yet we have to actually relate that to the judgmental or the qualitative methods also. So, in other words, we can say that we have no choice that only quantitative or only qualitative. If you really want to do good business management, you have to combine the both and you have to see which method will be the best one, optimizing the resources and the objectives of your management issue, whatever is in hand at this point of time. As I said, number of issues could be there. It could be as serious as like a PhD research, or it could be as quick as the day to day managing things. Okay, whatever be the case, so we have to decide about the management strategy for doing research at that point of time. Basically, it is the scientific bent of mind that is important for managing things. This is what we are trying to say, whether it is a day to day managing or a PhD research or whatever decisions we are doing, unless we have some data, some information, some analysis, okay, we cannot really arrive at a very scientific decision. And that's the objective. As when we began this, we did talk about the scientific inquiry. So, the choice of a specific forecasting technique will depend on various factors. What is the cost associated with this? As I said, optimizing resources. So in other words, I am just once again repeating that. What is the cost associated with developing the forecasting method compared with potential gains from its use? In other words, we will be looking at the benefits realized through the cost of implementation. Then how complicated are the relationships that are being forecasted? Is it for short run or long run purpose? How much accuracy is desired? Is there a minimum tolerance level for errors, and how much data is available to us? See, the tolerance level, when we are saying, when we are looking at the quantitative analysis, we are looking at the level of significance. We can have 2% level, we can have 1% level, we can have 5% level, we can have 10% level of significance. And typically, we will not like to go above 5% level. The idea here will be, if it is a 5% level that we have fixed up, for our analysis 5% level of significance, that means we will say that 95% cases are free of any kind of bias or chance factor or the real difference. Only 5% cases are because of some error or bias or something of that kind. Okay. So, typically we do not go beyond 10%. In some subjects, in some disciplines, well, it differs from discipline to discipline and perhaps the issue to issue, what do you really want to do and how much how much you want that it should be a error free judgment and decision, but rarely more than 10%, but generally sometimes if I really want to be very meticulous, 1% level will say for our analysis, I will expect 1% level. Okay. So, how much data is available, even that is a concern for our analysis. From here I move on to discuss some issues like scenario planning and also the SWOT analysis after business forecasting that we have done. Scenario planning is again a technique which is being used in our management research methods, and this is a technique which involves visualizing different ways in which the external environment may develop in the future and accordingly formulate strategies. Okay. So, we create a scenario and based on that we try to visualize the strategies. Once I was participating in one of the sessions of values in management. I can't recollect which body was that, maybe one of the bodies here, maybe FICCI or one of those bodies. I can't recollect exactly which one was that. So, there we were looking at the scenario planning, and all the participants were asked to give the scenarios about, say, the development of a particular issue. So, some people drew some scenarios, some people wrote that in words, and some people did analyze the whole thing, and then when you combine all that in the form of a report, you find that real scenario is emerging. Okay. And then based on that, then you can further analyze a particular situation, any development issues or any long term planning, you could do that. Okay. So, in the management research these days we are also using scenario planning. It involves identifying social, economic, political or technological developments that might have significant implications for the firm, for the state, for the organization. Here we have written firm, but that does not mean it is only limited to a particular firm. It could be limited to even a society or a particular state or a particular issue of development or the issue of values. Okay. So I mean, do not take it just like that it is limited only to that. Accordingly, pictures of possible outcomes are developed, and the we have here given you this example of Royal Dutch Shell. This is considered to be the best master of scenario planning. One of the books I found on this reference, so I thought maybe I will share that with my students. Okay. So, many companies had been making use of the scenario planning. From here we move on to the SWOT analysis. I am sure many of you have heard about it. SWOT analysis has 4 components: strength, weakness, opportunities and threats. Whenever you want to make any decision, perhaps this would be a very quick method for you to make decisions. You can list the strengths of the situation or your decision, weaknesses, opportunities or threats. These could be 1, these could be 9, 10, 50, we do not know, because that is your analysis. So, a group might sit and everyone tries to list that if we are doing this kind of expansion plan in my company, then what happens? what will be their strength, weakness, opportunities and growth, and everyone discusses and everyone gives their ideas about it. Okay. And then we analyze. So, but before I go further, let us see SWOT analysis is used for identifying those areas where organization needs to pay special attention to certain things. As I said in the expansion plan, perhaps that just came to my mind as an example. This helps a company to find answers to various questions, and the analysis then, well, I'll move on to this just in short while from now. So, the SWOT analysis I can really, in the SWOT analysis I can analyze any special situation. I can ask all of you to write about your perception of values, strength, opportunities and threat, because in every situation there may be certain positive aspects and there could be at least in your mind there could be certain negative consequences. So, when we analyze these, and I could do that also for myself, for my own decision making, and also we can do for an organizational decision making. I can make a composite index of all the SWOT analysis and analysis that I might get, and then arrive at some kind of a formula saying that in my company this is what I am going to do as my growth or the expansion program. Okay. But for individual decision making also we are making use of SWOT analysis, very common. If I want to see whether a particular educational institution is doing well, I can do SWOT analysis. I can interview all the decision makers, say of my institute, and look at the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and growths from each one of them, and then compile results and prepare a report. Okay. So, this helps us in the further planning again and the analysis of what are the state of affairs currently in a particular organization, right. So, from these methods which I have discussed so far, we now move on to certain issues which I have just now shown you, the ethics. Any research that we are doing, the ethical issues are extremely important, and let us now move on to the ethics in business research. Since business research you will find will involve people, involve society, involve organizations, okay, at least in a large number of that. We have to look at some of the ethical issues very closely. Sometimes people might say, why are you asking me so many questions? It is invasion of privacy. Sometimes they will say that you asked me this question, but this was the issue of deception, because you try to sort of ask the question in such a way that I got confused and amounts to deception. So, people might say that. Already existing negative consequences may be there about certain things, and we are still again trying to look at the negative, look at that particular aspect. Say for example, if I am a pharmaceutical company and I know that certain things have negative effects, but my marketing is suffering. So, sometimes I do not give the correct information, sometimes I am giving some medicines and I am not saying that this will result into this diarrhea or this or that. Okay. So, already existing negative effects are there, but I may still want to do some research. So, this is unethical. We have to make the person, the user aware of all these. Only then we can do these researches. Then hidden objectives, sometimes there may be a sponsored research, and sponsored research might say something that we wish to help in development, but there may be some kind of a hidden objective which must be made very clear. Now the application. So we have designed, now so far you are in my journey to design management research, then how to design objectives, the methods, various management issues, and also after we have done that, we have looked at that we have also to be very ethical when we are designing management research. And now we come to certain applications and what are the difficulties, why sometimes people do not believe some of your research. The reasons could be that there may be mistrust in social sciences. See, as we have seen, large part of management research relates to people, society, organizations, interpersonal sort of relationships, and the business, marketing. Okay. So, sometimes there may be difficulty because people might have mistrust. Many times people believe that okay, social sciences are not really very valid in their approach, if I may say so. Okay. So, we have to make it a very scientific in terms of its approach, and so that the credibility of the management research that you are doing is not well at stake, I can say that. So, you have to be very meticulous in designing your study. Then inability in conducting this scientific research, you also need training in conducting a scientific research. Otherwise, many people just sitting on their armchair, they start believing that, oh, I am an expert in management research, so whatever I say is the final thing. No, the management research is a real engrossed subject. One needs training, one needs a real scientific temper to conduct any kind of research. Why management research? Any kind of research, and so that is also true about management research. And then the inability in implementing social science research, because again social science I am using interchangeably with management research because of the reason that largely the subject matter comes under this larger paradigm. Then flowing from earlier these issues, also disagreement that you might have about the worth of these findings. Disagreements could be again because you start believing that there is some kind of a mistrust, or the scientific fervor is not there, and this kind of a situation could be there. So, we have to be extremely careful in designing the management researches. So, when we have collected data, we have to interpret that if we are going in for a very scientific inquiry, and sometimes we find that our interpretation problems are there. So, first I will quickly discuss with you the principles of interpretation of business research data, and then we move on to some other aspects. So, the interpretation of data is the final stage in a research study, and that means drawing proper inferences and conclusions. So, we must remember that is whatever statistics we have really drawn, is it an end, or is that a means to arrive at certain conclusions? Sometimes we start believing, okay, this is the significant level and that is it, nothing more. But then if you are interpreting that data, you have to look at your management system, your social system, and then try to interpret that data. Okay. So, that is important. Therefore, there is no need to be to depend 100% on that. You have to do interpretation, and there is need to be very careful in the interpretation of results to avoid any danger of wrong conclusions. Okay. Then we should ensure that the data is homogeneous and comparable. And so, data should be adequate, reliable, related to the problem of research, collected through a bias free method, that means the sampling design that we have discussed, and be scientifically analyzed. Interpreter should be guided by the truth and truth alone. Interpreter should be familiar with the problem. Remember, one who is conducting a research should be intimately familiar with that problem and should have a logical thinking, experience and knowledge, because these are important as basis for interpretation. Then the language of interpretation should be clear, unambiguous, understandable by the user. In fact, these are also the principles of communication. When you are trying to give a scientific communication to someone, these are the principles which we have to use. If statistics is not used with proper training, possibility of false generalization may be there. These may be wrong, so there may be a wrong interpretation. Then drawing conclusions about whole on the basis of few samples. Sometimes we will just take 10 or 15 samples and then we will try to generalize. That is done many times in management research. So, we have to see that how generalization may not be possible. You could talk about a few case studies, but if you want to generalize that, perhaps you then need a larger study for that. Then confusing averages, mean, median and mode are the three measures of central tendency. I am sure all of you know that, and many a times researcher might use mean, mode and median as the same indication or interpretation. Do you know what is a median? Do you understand that? Median is the 50th percentile. Percentile, you understand that? Well, maybe when you do your detailed course on management research methods, you will be discussing many of these minute details. But for now, remember that mean, median and mode are the three measures of central tendency, but these are giving us different we can say different interpretation. It has to have a different interpretation, different values are there. Okay. Then there may be seasonal variations. Okay. Say for example, when you want to market something before Diwali, or you are trying to market something in hot summer. Okay. In your research design itself, you have to build in some of these parameters. Then interpretation of coefficient of correlation, that again people might think what should be the value, what should be the significance level. You have to understand the sample size and all this. So, the interpretation of correlation coefficient itself sometimes might lead to wrong interpretations. And so, sensible statistics may be needed, and sometimes we overlook the intervening variables. We assume the world as a static world. We have discussed that in many other contexts, that the world is a dynamic world, ever changing, changing every day. And if you assume world as a static world, your interpretation might also get affected. And sometimes we report the same relationship in many forms, in a table, in a graphical interpretation, or maybe in the combined table. So, that might also make some difficulty. Then confusing reporting with prediction. Okay, prediction, when we are trying to predict certain things, reporting is just we are trying to report certain relationships, and also generalizing from a small sample and extrapolating results from different populations. You understand the meaning of extrapolation. You have results from different population and you are trying to extrapolate that for a situation. So, this is actually a difficulty, and these are the shortcomings in the interpretation of results, because then if you decide on the basis of this, there may be difficulty. Also, some of the other issues are that hypothesis of your study may be incorrectly stated. One or more assumptions of the hypothesis may be incorrect. There may be sampling errors. There may be inappropriate use of tests. There may be simple data processing errors. And so, is it clear that interpretations are important, and there will be many situations where because of wrong interpretations the report that we have made is actually not worth depending upon. Okay. Now, the theories, see whenever we begin with any research study, we have some theories, some assumptions, some concepts, and based on that we decide about an objective and decide our study. And when we look at the theory may be viewed as a thought process, that is a way of thinking about reality in a very simple terms. And a good theory is the one that has testability, clarity, precision, simplicity, and is parsimonious. And there are number of explanations which are there, in fact, in social research. And here these explanations of social research I am trying to discuss as the explanations for the management research too, because large part of management research is a social research as we have discussed, and Brown has listed 7 types of explanations in social research. These are genetic explanations, intentional explanations, dispositional explanations, explanations through reason, explanations through functional explanations, explanation through empirical generalizations, and formal theory. In fact, each one of these needs discussion, and in fact this slide itself might need 1 full hour of discussion. So, maybe some other time if we meet we will be discussing this. For now only this much is enough for this part, because I will just be closing discussing a few other things. So, let me now move on to the report writing. Report writing is the final communication of result for business utilization and excellence. When we have, after we have conducted our study and we have to prepare the report, the first consideration in report writing is that who is the audience for this report. In other words, the research was conducted for whom? Is it a PhD research, MTech research, is it a market research, is it for decision making, is it for day-to-day analysis of a particular phenomenon, is it for policy planning, is it for evaluation, what is the objective of the research that I am doing? And so, who are the audience? Is it a government agency? Is it my PhD examiner? Is it my client? So, based on that consideration, the report has to be written. This is the first aspect that you have to remember, and based on that you will design your study, whether it has to have a formal character or semi-formal character, or sometimes a general newspaper kind of a character. Okay. So, that you will decide, because we have so many good researches also appearing in the magazines and the newspapers. So, the way we are trying to communicate these results, these have a totally different way of report writing, whereas when you are writing a PhD thesis, it is a formal and very formal type of report writing. Okay. So, this point we have to keep in mind, and in this we have to also see the principles of communication. Communication in terms of the language, for example. I have already talked about the language aspect earlier, that we can use the language, but never use ambiguous language. There is no need of using very extremely flowery language. You could be straight away talk about a very simple language. Only then the communication gets across to every recipient. Everyone can understand if you are using very simple language. Now, when we are also writing a report and making it as a formal character, then graphical representations become extremely important. These could be of many types, say from bar chart, as I am showing the bar chart to you, to the frequency polygon. We can have the frequency polygons. We can also have other methods, for example, we can have pie charts. We can have pie charts. In addition to this, we can have the line diagrams. We can also have the scatter diagram. I am sure some of you have heard about it, and so on. So that the report really becomes self-explanatory sometimes and very scientific. So, from here, from the report writing, we move on to the last point in our lecture, which in fact will be conclusion of 2 lectures on the management research method, about the implications for utilization of social research. This is and for policy making. So, in fact, in every research, as I said, is for decision making, for policy making, for any kind of a future forecasting, any kind of a design of a particular system, and so on. So, when we are looking at the implications, we have the implications in terms of behavior control and prediction, policy making, utilization, decision making, and the report writing of course will be related to this particular aspect. And so, remember that the utilization of policy making, if you look at the models could be sometimes just the research is done as an enlightenment model. Okay. Sometimes it could be done as a problem solving model. Sometimes it could be done as a quick decision making model. Sometimes it could be done as some sort of a formal knowledge generation model, just for generation of knowledge. Okay. So, there could be many models for research utilization, and what model we are using again depends on our objective of the research. So, we move on from here to understand various aspects of the management concepts, and we move on to the various chapters in management. I hope you have been able to understand that how will you conduct management research. There are very many areas of management research and which you will be able to use in your studies. Okay. Are there any questions on the management research? There are many references on this. Well, what I was teaching you, this is of course a combination of many sources, and some of those are given in the list of references which I am going to give you at the end of the whole course. You will find a list of the references about the whole course itself. So, you will find many things, and these softwares are available now. Very you can buy the softwares, and in that there are manuals. You can make use of that. But then this is a really very much involved subject, and if you are really wanting to make use of management research method, then you have to very carefully look into all aspects of management of design of a research. So, I close with this.